so much. So thank you, Elena, so much for the invitation to share ideas about business agility with the Bay ALN. I live in the Bay Area here and have always appreciated and attended when I can. And this is getting my itch back to do more with this group. So I'm with the Business Agility Institute, as Elena said. This is a group who is fiercely independent, focused on research and advocacy for modern human-centric ways of working, for basically business agility. It was founded by Evan Laybourne, who's based in Melbourne, Australia, and Ahmed Sidki, who is in Irvine in Southern California. And we have a fourth team member, Chris Morales, who's in Germany, and a couple hundred volunteers who help us bring the research and our programs and activities to life. So today, what I want to share with you are some thoughts around Mind the Gap. And this is inspired by the London Underground, the London Tube. If you've ever been to London and rode their subway there, you see these signs all over the place. And what they're reminding you of is that there's a gap between the your exit or entrance to the subway car and the floor outside of that. And in some cases, it's a very small gap. And in some cases, you better watch it or you may end up with a heel caught in a place that's really unfortunate. So it's a great metaphor for business agility. So we'll get a little bit into what is business agility and this journey. Now, I have a caution for you. There will be mixed metaphors. When I get an itch to put a presentation together, something like this, I come up with every possible way to use the travel metaphor. So not only will we be going on a journey with respect to the subway, but we're going to be in kayaks and on planes and all kinds of great things here. So my apologies, but not really, for mixing some metaphors here and having some fun with this idea. So first, destination check. You got to know where you're going when you're a business, as much as if you're a traveler on the London Tube. And at the Business Agility Institute, we believe that the destination for companies that they need to hold very firmly in mind, that's their North Star, if you will, is what their organization's purpose is. Now, for some organizations, that is an awesome thing about making the world a better place, sustainability, regenerative ecosystems. Other organizations, the purpose is a simpler, perhaps more old school, taking care of shareholders and employees. But what that purpose is, you need to know where you're going before you start figuring out how you're going to get there. And one of the taglines for the Business Agility Institute is no matter what the future brings, because it used to be a lot easier to talk about where you were going before all of the VUCA volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity started showing up a few years ago. So, sometimes the destination, you know where it is, you've got all the oars in the water, everybody is rowing in the right direction, but oh, wait a minute, there's another part of the organization that's also got all the oars in the water, another very awesome team working really hard. And you're actually not getting any closer to your destination because the organization is basically in a tug of war, literally, in terms of not understanding what the destination is, what the purpose is that everybody is trying to achieve. So this is a little bit of a metaphor for some of the challenges we see in business today. Now, whoops. So with that, I'd like to ask if there's anybody who is brave enough to share how would you define business agility, but wrong answers only. Anyone want to speak up and share an awful definition of business agility?
I'll try. Changing all the time and for no apparent reason.
Oh, changing all the time for no apparent reason. That's a good wrong answer, Andy. Anyone else?
When our all Scrum teams delivering on time.
Ha! There you go. Scrum teams are always delivering on time. Anyone else? Definition of business agility. I always figure
able
there's, go ahead.
able to make money doing one thing, and when that source stops coming in, you can find a different way to start making money.
Ah, there's always a way to make money. It's all about the money. And if one stops, you find the next one. Good. Good. You know, we do this a number of times to kind of break the ice and to get people to start talking about business agility. And sometimes I go into a group where nobody wants to speak. And I thought, you know, how do I bridge this gap? And one of the things I realized is I have this really good friend named ChatGPT. And I asked them to give me an incorrect definition of business agility. And here is literally the answer they gave us. Business agility refers to the ability of a company to change its logo and slogan whenever the CEO gets bored. Now, that's a pretty funny definition, but at the same point in time, there's an element of truth in that. Out in the world of business today, there are folks who believe that business agility is a bit of a cliche, and it's just kind of an indication of the mood and the fad that the C-suite is most interested in. So then I asked my friend ChatGPT, well, can you give me like a thorough definition of business agility? And what I got back was exactly this. Now I'm not going to read that all to you because you'd be ready to like just go find some pizza or you'd be sleeping. But the interesting thing to me is as I read through this, I don't actually vehemently disagree with any of this. And at the same time, it's a wall of jargon. I ran across a term that someone uses now about jargon monoxide. And as agilists, I think that we have brought that up to a level of art in terms of too many pieces of jargon, too many words. And if I'm an executive who has heard about business agility and I ask ChatGPT for a definition, I'm going to stop listening. I'm going to go find something else to do. And so part of my call to action to anyone I speak to is let's find simpler, more business-centric ways to talk about what we do so that we don't have the executives disengage. So this is the definition that the Business Agility Institute uses, and that is that business agility is a set of capabilities, behaviors, and ways of working that give your organization the freedom, the flexibility, and the resilience to achieve your purpose. So business agility and agile for that matter, the end goal is not agile or business agility. It is an enabler for an organization to be able to achieve its purpose no matter what. And we, over the last 4 or 5 years, have leaned very heavily into the importance of building capabilities and behaviors. Because even if you're talking about helping a enterprise, a huge global multinational enterprise, become more agile, to adopt more agility, it really boils down to the behaviors of each person in that organization and how that builds together to create the capabilities that you need. So this is one of Ahmed's favorite videos and favorite ways to visualize what business agility looks like. So these folks, this is parkour, which is a training discipline or an obstacle course. And these folks have a target that they are trying to get to. And each challenge that they encounter along the way is an obstacle that they just figure out how to get around it. Nothing's going to stop them. They keep moving towards whatever that destination, that target is that they have. Now, I don't know about you, but the last couple of years, there's been a lot of things that have felt like I've landed on my rear end hard on some rocky soil and have had to do rolls and deal with bruises the next day. So I think it's a great illustration of what business looks like today. Now, before we move on, I want to talk just a little bit about Agile with a capital A versus business agility, because we get this question a lot. And this is not the gospel of anybody. This is our take on it. And if it resonates with you, awesome. And if it doesn't, that's cool as well. But our take on kind of the ecosystem that we all work in is there's agile teams. So the classic, 5 to 9, a small team of folks who are working to achieve a particular goal. It wasn't too many years that it took us to figure out that a lot of what we are doing now requires more than small, discrete, agile teams who are completely independent. So we started to talk about how do you align teams to be able to deliver more than a single agile team can deliver. That moved into talking about agile outside of software or IT. Think agile for marketing, agile in HR, agile in finance. We call that agile business, not to be confused with business agility, which is really looking at the overall enterprise and how value flows end to end across the enterprise, from being a great idea to being value that's in the customer's hands. Now, for folks who are very systems thinking oriented, you're going to say, well, no, duh. But this is like groundbreaking ideas for some folks who are very much thinking about Scrum and SAFe and things like that, and kind of missing the fact that it's that end-to-end flow of value that matters. Now, there's another red dot off to the right of business agility, which is an emerging space, and it's ecosystem agility, if you will. One of the things that you will be hearing more about in the next 3 to 5 years is the need for there to be agility within an ecosystem of companies who sometimes compete, sometimes cooperate towards creating value for a customer set. A classic example is if you talk to the folks at Roche, a pharmaceutical company, they can conceive of a healthcare ecosystem where they are a player, but other pharmaceutical companies, hospitals, insurance companies, all kinds of companies need to be able to work together to collaborate in an agile fashion in order to create value for patients and for healthcare people who work in healthcare. So there's that whole scale matters. And I think this is super important because it's a fluid thing. And it's not like you finish one, you check the box and you move on. Because when we talk to organizations at the C-suite about how their organization functions, 9 times out of 10, one of the things we uncover is the agile teams still need some love and some growth and some evolution in order to keep up with the change that's coming. So now a few travel advisories. We have 4 principles that like build on the definition of business agility that I shared with you. One is that business agility is an ongoing journey. When we talk to an executive, we make the point that that business agility is a new way of operating your business, a new way of managing your business. It's not something that you install. It's not a project where you start it, you check all the boxes, and now you're done and you have the party and you just move on. This is a new way of acting, a new way, and it's ongoing. So it's a continuum. Second principle is there's going to be a range of excellence within an organization. And that range of excellence will vary from day to day and from person to person. And that's okay. It's not like we're looking to have the same level of agility and the same type of agility in a finance team, for example, as compared to the product development team or the customer service team. And even within a team, there's going to be a variation in the behaviors that you see and the capabilities that manifest over time. Third principle is there are thousands of ways to achieve business agility. And this is, I guess, one of the differentiators for us versus some other organizations who talk about business agility. We are agnostic. We believe that you can succeed with a number of different frameworks, and you will actually often need to combine frameworks and to use different frameworks in different parts of the organization to achieve different aspects of that journey towards your purpose. So there are thousands of ways of doing it. And in most organizations I've seen of any size, more than one framework has been needed. And then finally, it all boils down to behavioral change. If you act with agility, you have agility. And so even when we talk about agile or agility at the enterprise level, at the ecosystem level, it still boils down to people and how they interact, both with how they interact with each other and how they interact with the systems of the business. So the question then becomes one of where are you now? Because if you know where you want to go, you need to know where you are to be able to understand how do you chart a path. And that leads us to a model that we developed about 4 years ago now called the Domains and Capabilities of Business Agility. And this is a research-based model. The first iteration of this was instigated by the government in New Zealand, who contacted BAI during the pandemic and said, we'd really love to have an evaluation for New Zealand businesses where they could assess the degree of agility that they're operating with, so that they could ideally be more motivated to improve and be more competitive in the global business landscape. And so we put together a model based off of the old domains of business agility. If you followed, it was a circle, and that little experiment failed in a magnificent fashion because it was based off of trying to measure characteristics of an organization, which a characteristic can be like, how blue is the organization? It's almost impossible to measure characteristics. And that was when the aha went on that we needed to instead go back to ground zero and develop a model that was based on behaviors. Because if I can so for a behavior, if I can see it, I can measure it. And if I can measure it, I can model it. And so this model is based off of behaviors, about 84 behaviors to be precise, organized into these 5 domains: engaged culture, responsive customer centricity, people-first leadership, flexible operations, and value-based delivery. Now, value-based delivery, I think, has the strongest connections to the history of Agile with a capital A, because initially we were very, very focused about basically delivering value sooner. And of course, prioritize. But business agility then says the bigger picture then is, how do you engage your employees and how do you steward your culture of your organization in service of your customers, and the ability to sense something has changed, get ideas from a wider array of people and not just the boss, and how do you champion the customer. Now, flexible operations is Evan's favorite domain, because it's the boring bits, but it's often the boring bits that cause an organization to backslide as they embark on greater business agility, because this is your governance and your risk, and does that align with the new behaviors that you want your organization to exhibit? How do you fund your work? How are your strategies adaptive, and how well do they connect to how the work is done within the organization? So this is a model with a lot more information. You can download it and use it. I've seen the coaches use this to have retrospectives at the team level in terms of another way of thinking about the organization. And that goes all the way up to, we use this often with executives and C-suites to talk about their perspective on what's important in their organization and how do these different pieces fit together. So, and the 5-second plug is we have a model that will do an assessment for an organization and in essence draw a heat map for an organization where they can see where should they be investing more in and where are they the strongest in an organization. So that's the end of the ad for that. But if you're interested in hearing more about the profile, let me know. So a great organization is like a GPS. If you know where you are and where you want to go, you have to be ready to recalculate when things go off course. So I'm going to tell you a couple of different stories to illustrate the idea of minding the gap. And the gap, to be really specific, is a gap between the behaviors that an organization may traditionally have had and the behaviors that support agility, as well as gaps between those new behaviors and the old systems that are holding people back. So first story, about a month ago now, my husband and I had dinner with a friend of ours who has spent the last 35 years working for NASA in Virginia, which I'm a mechanical engineer by training, and I can't say that too much of what I do today smells like mechanical engineering, but this dude has been a traditional mechanical engineer for 35 years. He's at NASA, and he's in charge of a number of their wind tunnels. Now, if you know anything about wind tunnels, these are often really, really big structures that are used to test the aerodynamics of things like planes, cars, space shuttles, fun things like that. NASA hasn't had a new one of these things built in the last 40 years, but they just got a green light to have one built for about $43 million. Now, while that one's being built, my friend Tom is in charge of working to extend the life of the existing wind tunnels that are many years beyond their service life now. And in order to do that, his engineers from Virginia really need some face-to-face time with the technicians at the wind tunnels in other parts of the United States. And Tom was having major problems getting approval for the travel in order to do the work, in order to extend the life of the existing tunnels. Now, here's the kicker, is the repair that we're talking about for one of these wind tunnels is about $100,000 to $1 million. And he can extend the life of an existing wind tunnel by a number of years with that kind of work. But the alternative is buy a new wind tunnel for $43 million. It seems like it should be a pretty straightforward decision, but he just had a huge amount of trouble getting a travel approval. And finally, in the last, 3 months or so, NASA has told him, we're going to give you a pile of money and we will trust you to spend it in a reasonable way so that the engineers are able to work with the technicians to extend the life of these tunnels. And Tom was like, hallelujah, amen, because now he could do his work. This is an example of business agility. Tom has no clue that it is, but it is, because it was adaptive funding, enabling and empowering someone with accountability rather than having him have to cost justify every $500 plane ticket that his engineers needed to take from here to Kansas for a business trip. So another example is sometimes there can be really big gaps, and they actually turn out to be the small gaps. Now, this is a story of Mary Barra at General Motors. Mary's currently the CEO of General Motors, mechanical engineer by education, 40 years with the company, has led a number of different organizations in the company before becoming CEO, everything from the powertrain organization for one of the automotive lines to being the global human resources manager. So she has seen the whole business. And she was the global HR manager just back in the day, just as General Motors was coming out of bankruptcy. And she wanted to signal to the organization that the leadership team was committed to a policy change. And she chose to change one particular thing. She took a look at their dress code policy, and the dress code policy was 10 pages long. And she said, yeah, we're not going to do that anymore. We don't need in minute detail the dress code expectations for the sales folks and the technicians on the manufacturing lines and everything in between. So that 10-page policy was replaced with 2 words: dress appropriately. And so she announced this change, was rolling it out. And one of the folks who reported to her said, this will never work. We can't do this. And she's like, tell me more. And the guy said, well, I lead a team of leasing people here in Detroit. And we often get visits from the government and because they're a big customer of ours, and it's usually short notice, and I can't have my General Motors team members meeting with the US government in jeans. And Mary's like, huh, that's okay. I can see that. Well, why don't you talk to your team and see what you can work out? So grumble, 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 the manager goes off to talk to the team. And a few weeks later, Mary realizes that she hasn't heard from this guy. So she calls him up and says, hey, what's up? What's the deal with the dress code? And the person said, oh yeah, that's no big deal. We talked about it as a team, and everyone agreed that they would bring in a pair of dress slacks that they would just keep in their office. And if they got a call that the government was stopping by after lunch, they could change their clothes. But they are thrilled that otherwise they get to wear jeans to work. It was a big deal. And so Mary, about 10 years after this policy change, was interviewed as to how did she start to shift the culture at General Motors. And she credited this very, very small change with starting to create the biggest change that was possible at General Motors. So my challenge to all of us as Agilists is to consider, as we look at wanting to coach or to inspire behavioral changes in organizations and in people, is what's the smallest thing that we could help change that will lead to some of the big changes that we're looking at. They all don't have to be humongous. Another story. Sometimes gaps are created outside of an organization. So some gaps we have control of, some gaps we have actually instituted ourselves, things like 10-page dress codes. But then there's some things that we have no choice. It just shows up on our front door. And I think one of the biggest gaps that the business world is beginning to grapple with right now is this thing called artificial intelligence. Now, AI is a general purpose technology. It's like the steam engine, the electricity, the internet. It's believed to be a fundamental once in a generation technology that changes every aspect of life. Normally, there's very slow adoption. For the internet, ARPA started in the 1960s. It took 3 decades for us to get the browser, affordable computers, apps, the different things that have really transformed how we work. Now, actually, ChatGPT has been around, or not ChatGPT, AI has been around for about 30 years as well. But things changed drastically last year with ChatGPT hitting the stage, and it reached 1 million users faster than any technology that preceded it. Now, early studies say that 20 to 80% improvements in productivity for some job types is possible. There's all kinds of hype about this technology and how absolutely awesome it is and how it's going to change things. I think one of the things we're missing, though, is that technology needs to interact with the humans and the human systems that we have in business. So let me give you an example. So there was this is a story from McKinsey where they were challenged to take a look at cargo for passenger airlines. So passenger airplanes carry about 45% of all of the air freight that is transported in the world. And a 747 or an A230, 320, an A320 has a capacity for about 16 tons of cargo. And that's way more than the passengers and their luggage. So there's some opportunity here to be able to transport both people and their belongings as well as cargo from point A to point B. Now, that's even including me when I travel, and I have, way more luggage than any one person should ever have when they travel. But anyways, that's another story. Now, McKinsey said to their client, this is a perfect job for AI. So it can help you understand, to figure out how to plan for this, because it's kind of hard. You don't know how many people are going to be on the flight. You don't know how much luggage they're going to show up with. So how do you know how much cargo to commit to transporting? So AI, the solution, did a great job. So they were able to figure out to predict how much capacity they would have. And it also helped them figure out what to charge for it. So McKinsey then loops back to after the whole system's implemented and all the people did the technology happy dance. So, oh, this is so awesome. AI, yay, yay, yay. And McKinsey came back and said, you guys kind of have a little problem here. You're not getting any of the ROI whatsoever from this. What is going on here? It's basically the same situation as before. And what was going on was the people who actually plan for and palletize the cargo didn't understand how to palletize the cargo. So they weren't able to efficiently chunk the cargo in a way that it could be loaded into the plane in a reasonable way. So the issue now was no longer a technology problem, it was an ops problem. And the technology revealed the bottleneck that the company had to get past in order to achieve the ROI that had been predicted by implementing this AI solution. Now, I will tell you, this is not a point problem. If you're wondering, like, what does the future hold in the world for Agilists, I would say, if you're good at systems thinking and you're good at leading change, those are two things that I can assure you we will need a ton of help with as more organizations find out that the problem isn't AI, it's AI and how to integrate that into a system with people and with business systems. And that's a gap. So just a little observation is we believe that one of the ways to be able to look at artificial intelligence and that interaction with human-centric ways of working and human-centric systems is, again, the domains and capabilities model. And so we're going to be launching some research in July that will be looking at helping to weight where are the critical capabilities from a human perspective that are necessary for an organization who's adopting AI to be able to realize the ROI that they're looking for. So stay tuned for that research, because if that's something that interests you, we'll have some places where we'd be interested in talking with you or having you complete a survey. So finally, last story. Sometimes the gap is an invisible gap. And these are really tough because you don't even know that you've got a gap. So This is a story about our friends at Netflix. And if you've been in the Bay Area for really any amount of time, you probably know how well Netflix is regarded for its culture. They published the Culture Deck, talking about their culture, geez, probably decades ago now. And Reed Hastings, the co-founder, former CEO, and the chief chair for the organization, he's a big proponent of this and has been a mastermind for being a steward of the culture of Netflix. In fact, in 2010, Reed was named Fortune's Business Person of the Year. And then in 2011, Reed did something that was probably a little bit stupid. At the time, the Netflix had their traditional initial business of shipping DVDs, so they still had that going, and they were starting to see significant success with their streaming business. And Reed's position was, let's split this into two businesses. So we'll spin off the DVD business. We'll call it Quickster, and we'll keep Netflix as the streaming business. So now there's two websites. If I am a user of both, and I remember distinctly making the decision at the time that we wanted to be able to do both, you had to have two accounts, and net, it cost you 60% more than before they spun off Quickster. So all of a sudden now, Reed Hastings, who's this leader who is respected for being such a people person and so good with culture, he gets the nickname of Greed Hastings. It got so bad that Saturday Night Live did a parody of Netflix and what they were doing here. Their stock fell by 75%. One critic said that this decision belonged in the Bad Decision Hall of Fame, along with New Coca-Cola, Prohibition, and visiting a 24/7 Vegas wedding chapel after having had too many shots. So it was like, this is awful. And eventually Reed saw the light and backpedaled, and they pulled this back together. The thing that was bothering him, though, was trying to understand, why did this happen? Because he thought that he had a culture that was psychologically safe, that it was okay for people to disagree, for people to speak up. But here, nobody said anything to him, and he started asking why. And the feedback that he got was, as a leader, he was so passionate about this idea, and he was so sure that this was the right thing to do, that nobody felt comfortable speaking up to him and disagreeing with him. So here's the guy who wrote a book called No Rules Rules, who said, you know what, in this case, we need a rule. And we need a rule that says that it's okay to disagree with a boss. And in fact, if you're an executive or a champion for a major initiative at Netflix, you are expected to do what he calls dissent farming. So if you've got a great idea like Quickster 2.0, your job is to go out and say, hey, Elena, I've got this great idea. What do you think of it? And actively look and give her space to say, I think that might be the stupidest idea you've had in the last 10 years. And then go to Hari and say, hey, Hari, hey, Andy, hey, Gordana, what do you think? And I love that story because it illustrates a couple of things. One is, it's a journey. It's never done. It's ongoing. And it's important to realize that there's sometimes you have to, all the time, you need to create a culture and a system and a place with the room for people to tell you that you've got spinach on your teeth. I was going to say something else, but that's the politically correct way of saying it. So, a few parting thoughts for you. One is, don't let your business agility journey go underground. There's a lot of resources out there. The businessagility.institute website has a lot of information. So if we can help you, please let us know. Start where you are. That's an extension of the old Agile, meet people where they are. Remember what the destination is. And if you're coaching an organization, make sure to understand what their purpose is and set their expectation that there's going to need to be lots of recalculations as you go off. Because no matter what the future brings, it can bring success provided that you create an organization and a culture and an environment to nurture that. So with that, I will thank you, and I think I might be able to put these into the chat. A couple of ways to engage with us. Yeah, I don't know if that worked very well or not. We are currently doing our annual business agility survey where what's the state of business agility in the world? Would love to have your thoughts and ideas on that. If you're a consultant, you can do the survey as if you were one of your clients, or if you work in an organization who's on the Agile/business agility path, you can just answer it as yourself. There's a link to download the domains and capabilities. And then finally, we do a newsletter every other week, lightweight, fun, and we work really hard to make it useful. So would love to have you subscribe. And that's it.
Thank
So I'll hand
you,
it back to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let me stop recording.